You know, in other moments, you've described fascism as sort of a pathology of injured power, right? In our conversations yesterday, I was talking about, I like to call them the oligarchs, because there is something so bro-y about them, right, that we actually have to address in their belief system. But for them, right, if we're talking about the tech right, if we're talking about the oligarchs, what are for them their perceived injuries, right? What is actually what they're threatened by, what they're attacked by? And how does that help us explain why these billionaires that have more money than most countries have now decided that they also have to capture the state and also have to use that power?
Yeah, it's a great question because fascism is always comes up in these pincers um, of real crisis and also real threat of redistributive power from below, right? So we know that about fascist Germany, which is a classic example of after being pummeled by the First World War and then being afraid that the Russian Revolution would spread to Germany, a very strong socialist movements, that creates that alliance of the sort of injured strong, those military veterans and industrialists coming together. Another moment is Reconstruction in the U.S. South, right? The injuries of the Civil War, and the loss of wealth from emancipation, and the real redistribution that was happening during Reconstruction. That Black people were winning power and redistributing land. And that is the moment of the fascist moment in the United States. I mean, some people are, still deny that the US ever was fascist and wonder, could it happen here? It happened here, right? And that pincer was there. Latin America in the 70s is another moment of that pincer, and where you had those strong left movements and you had economic crisis, social democrats being elected in Chile, right? And I think it's a little hard for us to imagine that leftists, progressives could have presented that kind of a threat to the tech right. But if we, think about the moment when we connected in 2018, that Google walkout moment, then and all that first wave of tech worker organizing that canceled Project Maven. I think what we're now hearing from these guys is that they felt that they were losing their companies, their kingdoms to their workers. And I think that injury is relative. It has to do with how much status you had before. So a lot of these guys are, the key figures in this story, Thiel, Musk, Mark Andreessen, they all came up in the peak moment of reverence for tech wealth. Mark Andreessen was on the cover of Time magazine when he was 23, sitting in a golden throne, because he invented an internet browser that doesn't exist anymore. But like, it's true. He invented Netscape. But he really does believe that he belongs on that throne. And everything that has happened since has been a letdown. And I think particularly that moment when workers were organizing, when Amazon was, wanted to build a new headquarters in New York City, in Queens, and Mi Gente organized with warehouse workers, and that coming together. Amazon also had Amazon Workers for Climate Justice. We have any Amazon Workers for Climate Justice here? I mean, I think that I think they had a feeling of being surrounded, right? Their own workers were sort of calling bullshit on their net zero green claims, things like that, and saying, no, we really want you to change. So I think that accumulated into an injury. And I think the pandemic also was a strange moment, because it was a moment where they increased their wealth astronomically. We were all online way too much. They caught a glimpse of the future they actually wanted, where every single human interaction was mediated by their technology. But it was also a moment where people were recognizing the power of so-called essential workers, which was their own warehouse workers, their own delivery workers. They did not like that. And I think that this moment that we're in now of like imagining this humanless future, like what if we could be trillionaires and have no workers? That's their idea of heaven. I think that is their idea of heaven. Is a response to that. So yeah.
They're scared. They're scared of the organizing. And so just sort of building on that, because I think there's different pillars in terms of how the oligarchs are sort of going around the world, right? And obviously one of this is the concentration of wealth and power. But there's other ideas there around who is valued as a human and who is not, right? And so building on that, I want to talk a little bit about Palestine. You know, you've written that Gaza is a laboratory, not only for military technology and surveillance technology, which they have a lot, but also for a political project that normalizes the idea that entire populations are disposable, that their deaths don't require explanation or accountability. And Palestinians in recent months, but also the people in Lebanon and Iran, have experienced what could be called sort of a social death, right? A stripping of their humanity as a precursor to physical killings that have taken place. What do these tech oligarchs gain from a world where genocide is normalized? What is the cost to all of us, right? To our movements, to our sense of what's possible, when we start to absorb these ideas that some lives don't count? And how do we fight back against that?
Yeah, I mean, there's so much in that question, and it's so live now. And I think about Gustavo Petro, who the president of Colombia, who saw so early, you know, it was before the end of October 2023 when he said it's global 1933 about Gaza. He said it's global 1933, and he said that the world's poor sees their future in Gaza. And he connected it with the climate crisis specifically. You know, I don't think that I don't want to rank the biggest problems with data centers, but data centers, you know, it's worth understanding that what got Donald Trump interested in AI, he was not a guy who liked big tech before the recent election. He actually spent his off years suing a lot of these tech companies, right? The only time he talked about AI was to complain about Biden and ways that he was deploying AI. One of the things we look into in the book is like what changed him, because this is the center of his economic policy. This is kind of all he's got. The only thing he has to brag about is the stock market, and the stock market is riding on these 8 companies that are all neck deep in AI. And if you backtrack it and find out, like, what was it? How did they get him on board? It was this meeting that happened at David Sachs's house, or it was a fundraiser or a dinner, about 4 months into before the election, where they explained to him how much energy data centers would use. And Trump got excited because he loves fossil fuels. And he had just met with a bunch of fossil fuel companies in Mar-a-Lago and said, if you give me $1 billion, I'll give you everything you want. And what Trump understood was that AI, and this is a quote, was an energy-eating monster. I can't explain why he loves coal so much and why he loves gas so much, but I can tell you that what got him interested in AI was the fact that it was a backdoor subsidy to fossil fuels at a moment when renewables were finally becoming cheaper than fossil fuels. And that was the deal that they made. You will let us do whatever we want, and we will power it with fossil fuels and with nuclear. And that is what they've been doing. And so why do they need to normalize genocide? Because this is a genocidal project. They all know what this means to the world. I mean, the idea that Jeff Bezos is a climate change denier is absurd. This is a guy who named an arena in Seattle, the Climate Pledge Arena. You know, like all of these companies distinguished themselves from the previous industrial era with this idea that they were kind of post-industrial. They're blue, they're green. But what they came to understand is that they couldn't do AI without burning the planet, and they're just going for it. So that I think that these supremacist ideas don't come out of the blue. They come when they're needed. They come when you have to rationalize the monstrous, right? You need eugenics to rationalize enslavement. You need it to rationalize colonialism. And the resurgence in race science and the resurgence of genocidal ideologies and actions is because they understand the stakes of this. They understand that they can't have their dream without these tremendous human stakes. And so what Israel's, you asked about Israel. Obviously, many of the tech, CEOs are Zionists, some of them. But I don't think that's as simple. I don't think it's as simple as that. I think that there are some people like David Ellison, like maybe it's as simple as that. But I think for Silicon Valley, Israel stands in for the kind of society that they want, that they foresee for themselves, like that it is a elite bubble. The story of Israel's story is, we are this bubble of civilization surrounded by a sea of enemies that would wipe us out. And what we need to do about this is not make peace with our neighbors or have justice or end occupations or end apartheid. No, it's build a high-tech bubble and privatize it. And so that's why they, increasingly in Silicon Valley, they talk about the image of the network state as tech Zionism, not in the sense of Zionism supporting Israel, but in the sense of start your own country, in Prospera. Prospera is this sort of private country in Honduras, or wannabe private country in Honduras. So I simply to say that Israel is a model for a kind of fortress, high-tech bubble that sees itself surrounded by enemies, and that's connected to this self-conscious deepening of ecological disaster.
Well, let's keep going on this bunker theme. Because the people you call traitors to creation, right? Elon Musk, Mark Zuckerberg, Peter Thiel, they're all preparing for a world that they've written off, right? Like you said, they know it's coming, they're pressing the gas pedal, they have their bunkers in Hawaii and New Zealand, they're planning their getaways to Mars, but also borders are getting tighter, right? The walls are going higher, the technology that's being used to have borders is expanding, right? It's not just a physical line, it actually goes and permeates into every form of life. But at the same time, people aren't leaving their homes and crossing borders because they want to, right? They're moving because of multiple reasons, but one of them is that the climate is collapsing, right? Because extraction has made many of our homes uninhabitable. So how do we understand migration as a climate story? And what is that connection with the tech infrastructure, right? And the power that's powering AI, but that's also really meant to keep people in their place, in whatever, out of whatever the bubble and the fortress is.
Yeah, I think it's all of a piece, and it's all becoming clearer and starting to be said out loud. And I think this has been brewing for a long time, kind of on the margins. I mean, frankly, where you would see it most explicitly said, these connections, were in the manifestos of mass shooters like Andrei Breivik, who, Breivik inspired a series of other mass shootings, one in Christchurch, New Zealand, one in Buffalo, one at a Walmart in El Paso. All of the manifestos of these different mass shooters define themselves as eco-fascists. It's something that was not covered very much in the media. Breivik talked about climate debt in his manifesto. So I think we have to understand this iteration of fascism as a kind of climate adaptation, by which I mean they understand that we have entered this era where more and more people, as you say, are going to be forced off their lands. And their response to this is to fortress the nation and to cast ecological threat as the people shopping at Walmart. I mean, literally in the manifesto of that mass shooter, he said, Mexican people can't shop at Walmart like we do, or the world will burn. So we can't call these people climate deniers anymore. Even if they claim to be climate deniers, they know. They know that really there is a choice between equality, like actually recognizing that every human on this planet has a right to live in dignity and safety and thrive. And that means that the places that are going to be able to provide a better life are going to have more people in them. Or you subscribe to openly supremacist ideologies, you become a fascist and you fortress your borders. And that is, I think, where we are. And you know, the person who came up with the so-called Great Replacement theory, a French, you know, sort of leftist, he says his primary concern was ecology, protecting the French ecology. In Europe, the far-right parties are much more openly kind of ecological and cast their racism and anti-immigrant hatred as protection for the land. And I'm really interested in hearing what you are thinking about this, because as I said before, you've been on the cutting edge of these connections for so long, and I think you have a new the new ICE report, the Who's Behind ICE, coming out, and I would just love to get a preview from you about your thinking on this.
Yeah, I mean, when we first connected and we had just come out with the Who's Behind ICE report, you know, I think we had understood the Department of Homeland Security really building up a police force that could conduct its mission, which its mission was to identify, surveil, detain, and deport anyone who was undocumented in the United States. And I think when we did the first report and we're sort of uncovering, like, who is Palantir? What do they even do? What's working here? I think we sort of actually thought about it as profiteering, right? We thought all of these companies, whether it's Amazon or Thomson Reuters and LexisNexis or Palantir, they actually had reached a certain limit in terms of the market, right? Consumers weren't really that interested in their product past a certain level. And so we thought that they sort of saw DHS just as like a cash cow, right? There's a lot of money, there's a blank check, let's go there and build up our businesses there. I think what we're seeing now, 10 years later, is it's actually more sinister than that. And there is actually an interest by the oligarchs to make sure that we have a rogue federal police agency that is completely militarized, that is invested in surveillance, and that has no accountability, right? And for a long time, they had no accountability just with immigrants, but now that what we've seen is criminalization is a slippery slope, right? And as soon as they start to marginalize one community, it continues in all of its forms. And I think part of what is just dangerous is we actually have to acknowledge that it is this connection between the tech world and the DHS police state that is sort of what is posing this threat. And part of the reason I say it is because, you know, if we are lucky enough to be in a place where we have elections and, you know, who knows what will happen in the next round, and we are once again dealing with Democrats, you know, I would say this in the most eloquent way possible, which is Democrats tend to suck, and betray our communities time and time again. And so if we don't actually, I think part of my fear is that if we're not in this moment able to describe actually all of the connections of what's happening, we're gonna go back to the old democratic way of like, well, these immigrants are the ones that are bad and criminalized, and those we can actually use state violence against, but we'll save a couple of folks on the margins. But actually it's in that process, what they are building, right, is actually the force of the state that can use for repression. And that is for political reasons, for protection whenever we have a climate disaster. You know, the list goes on in terms of how and when they can use it. But so that's for us why we've been working on the second draft of the report with Paromita Shaw and Mizue Seki, who are somewhere in this beautiful room. Because it is important to tell the story of how immigration policing has been changing and what the implications are for all of us.
Yeah, well, I'm really looking forward to that. And I do think that that fusion of repressive state power and tech is it's not as simple. I mean, I'm still trying to figure this out. I'm not even sure they have figured it out. You know, I think there are various visions of the future. You know, upload your consciousness to the AI, merge with the machines, have your own startup country. But I also think that Alex Karp was very honest about a month ago when he was bouncing around on some stage or other and said, he was explaining why, you know, Palantir reported Anthropic, right, for asking questions about whether or not their tech had been used, I think in the boat strikes in the Maduro abduction. And, you know, I think it put them in an awkward position that Alex Karp keeps bragging about killing people on stages, and they're trying to kind of be low-key about it. So they asked some questions about whether it was like violating their terms of service or something. I don't know what they thought was going to happen when they signed this contract with the U.S. military. But so then Palantir reports them, and the rest is history. But Karp, in explaining why it was not acceptable for Anthropic to have any red lines, right? So their red lines were no mass surveillance of the domestic population and no completely autonomous weapons, right? So there has to be some sort of check. And so Karp says, you can't, just a few days earlier, the CEO of Microsoft had bragged that they were going to eliminate all white collar jobs. And I think they don't understand that people can hear them. And so anyway, so Karp says, look, you can't just eliminate all white collar jobs and not do whatever the military wants. If you're going to destroy all the jobs, you've got to basically merge with the US military. So that to me is an admission that they understand that they're in the mass immiseration business. And if you do that, people will rise up. And so you have to make common cause with these different forms of repression. Some of it is directed at immigrants, and that's not where it's going to stop. You know, they're very clear about this.
You know, and one of the things that we've been talking a lot about at Media Justice is sort of how this building of a militarized police state, how all of this technology is also really leading to the buildup of data centers, right? They want us to think that it's all for your chatbot, that it's all for whatever, you know, this is going to be helpful. But we know that a lot of the infrastructure that they're building is for surveillance, is for the military, is for war. And so in the past, you've multiple times called for an eco-populist movement, right? And so I think the question really is, what would that need to succeed? What are its elements? What are its principles? And how does that connect to the dope-ass organizing we're seeing around data center organizing, right? Folks being able to shut down data centers in their communities, in their homes, in their states. What is that connection?
Well, I mean, it's an extraordinary uprising that has happened. And, you know, it's been great meeting people here who have not, as of yet, have not met other data center organizers, and people who have, it's just happened within this year. So this is quite extraordinary for there to be a spontaneous uprising in so many different types of places, deep red towns, you know, and very blue cities, and for it not to be networked. And now the power of what happens now that it is becoming networked is very, very exciting. But what, you know, I think there's a few things that I think are really heartening about it. One is that these movements, from what I've seen, are really rooted in love of place. They're really, like I was saying at the beginning, and also as we heard from our welcomers, I mean, this is where the most powerful movements come from, right? They're not, the most powerful movements, as you all know, are not driven by a hatred of our enemies, just a little of that, right? But they are driven by a fierce love, right? If our hatred comes from the fact that we are protecting the places and the people that we love. And There are so many beautiful stories in this organizing where people are falling more deeply in love with their places and learning more about them. And I think that that's connected, like that's the medicine that we all need because we are far along in the tech story and we all feel that this is able to advance and seem like maybe a good idea. Like maybe we should allow all of our jobs to be disappeared so someone can become a trillionaire. Like the fact that that is a thinkable thought is because we are really far into their dystopia, which means that we've spend way too much time in front of screens and we have lost some of the ability to be in community and be with each other and even understand where we live, right? Because we're so glued to these screens that are sort of everywhere. And so the more that these campaigns become, yes, a no to the data center, but a yes to where we live, including a grief for what has already been lost. You know, and creating spaces where we are able to grieve together, I think the stronger we'll be, and the stronger the movements that come out of that connection will become. The eco-populism is, you know, it's a response, I think, to the failures of the climate movement in the past to sort of foreground things like carbon pricing or carbon trading or these really, you know, abstract policies that either do increase the cost of living for working people or are very easy to cast as increasing the cost of living for working people. So I think, you know, Zohran Mamdani didn't run for mayor of New York City as a climate candidate, but he did run promising free and fast buses, which is a climate policy, right? So that's the kind of thing which I would say, you know, sending a clear message. You don't need to choose between caring about the planet, the living world, and caring about paying for your bills. We can lower the rent and lower emissions at the same time. You know, it's heartbreaking to me as somebody who fought for a Green New Deal and still believes it's our best chance, that kind of policy of creating huge numbers of jobs in ecological restoration, in energy transition, that the cost of this AI data center rollout is pretty much the cost of what a Green New Deal would have been, which we were all told was so unaffordable, right? You know, KeShaun Pearson, we're going to hear from him next on an amazing panel. There he is. You know, I love the organizing they're doing in Memphis. You know, you'll hear it directly from KeShaun. You don't need to hear it from me. We have a chapter about them in our upcoming book. That's how much we love them. But it's not just about what is being, the money that is being spent in Memphis on these massive dead buildings, you know, lifeless buildings with blinking lights spewing toxins into the atmosphere. It is what's not being built. And, you know, this is something that they're really focused on in Memphis. What could you do with that money in terms of public transit, in terms of green transition? Yes. Right? And so I think we have to constantly be talking about that in our communities because it isn't inevitable. And it isn't like just because there's the tech, we have to do it. Because think of all the green tech that exists that we are not deploying in this country. It's just that that's not going to turn them into trillionaires. And that's what this is about. So I think eco-populism is also about going after the billionaires before they become trillionaires. And, you know, and like right now, there should be a windfall tax on every fossil fuel company that's profiteering off of an illegal war, right? And that...
Well, you touched a little bit on this, the inevitable, like this narrative around inevitability, right? I think what we've heard time and time again from organizers fighting data centers, that's actually one of the big things that we have to overcome. A lot of elected officials are like, well, it's going to get here eventually anyway. We might as well negotiate with them. Why actually try to fight back and say that we don't need a data center? What have you found to be the actual ways that we can talk about this to fight against that inevitability narrative that tries to keep our organizing away?
I mean, I think Georgia has shown the country and the world that this is a winning electoral issue. This is populist. It is popular, right? People do not want their electricity bills going up. They're worried about water. And the thing that is being produced by these AI centers is not something that people want, you know? I've been in a lot of like community-based struggles against pipelines and fossil fuel infrastructure. And they would say, well, everybody uses fossil fuels and, keeps the lights on, or, they would make these arguments that were about utility. They're not able to make those arguments about AI. I mean, they're using this stuff to create, like, what, Grok in Memphis? To create nudification apps? I mean, they're slop factories. They're also, we know, completely merged with the military now. So there isn't even that offer of, like, we're making something good, right? It's like, we're doing this to replace your jobs. So this is a winning issue. And if there aren't politicians who are picking it up, it's because there's something wrong with those politicians. Very, very wrong with those politicians. And it probably means that they've been bought off by these tech companies. And so I think we've, in the same way that taking APAC money has become toxic, taking AI PAC money also has to become toxic. No, it's not inevitable. Like, literally, what they are selling is the plot of every dystopian film and TV series that we numb ourselves out on by watching. This is it. People do not want armed robot dogs. This is an unpopular plan that they have. They don't want armed drones in New Orleans. I mean, it is a wildly dystopian vision. And I think sometimes it's almost unbelievable. It almost feels cliche. Like, I found this when we were doing this writing, was like, you almost feel like mad writing it or saying it, because it is this dystopian cliche. But this is where I think we really have this opportunity to create these unlikely, unexpected alliances where we are coming together over issues like farmland, not a data center; water, not a data center; right? Clean air, not a data center. It's really, really basic. It's okay for it to be basic. It's okay, and that's, I think, something that folks here with roots in Latin America know. That sort of life-based organizing is how you build a really broad coalition, and we can do that here. I believe this is our invitation to do it.
Amazing, yes. Well, to wrap it up and bring it home, the folks in this room are organizing against those data centers, or organizing against that surveillance tech, or organizing against the immigration raids, against policing. What do you see in this moment that gives you the cliche? We're talking about cliche, the cliche question: what gives you hope? But also, in seeing all of these crises mounted on top of each other, what are opportunities that we see, right? I think we are making wins, but the demand for what we have to build, right, is big. So what are both opportunities, but also places we should build as we're looking for that hope, as we're building community, as we're strategizing together this weekend?
Well, I guess I think we shouldn't be afraid to speak in the language of spirit, and to really understand that people have a deep longing to be part of something larger than themselves, to be part of something grand. As I said, this is one of the things that's disturbing about studying fascism, is you realize there's a pleasure in it. Look at Trump rallies, right? There is a kind of an eros to it, right? And so I think that it's important in how we think about organizing. I don't think we emulate that, but I think we do have to think about how we are creating pleasure and belonging and big stories, not of end times, but of better times, right? It's, talking about Memphis again, you think about Martin Luther King's last speech in Memphis, right? And this idea of, like, bringing some heaven down to earth, and that it's not about New Jerusalem up there. What about New York, he said, right? So I see that in the organizing. I see people bringing so much heart to this organizing and reaching their arms out to neighbors who, like, might have voted for Trump, right? And I take tremendous hope in the just outrageously incredible organizing that took place in Minneapolis, and that You know, Adam Serwer called it neighborism, which I love that idea of just like the neighbor. It doesn't matter, as he said, you know, whether you're from Minneapolis or Mogadishu, you're here now, and we've got to have each other's backs. So I think what we need to do is we need to fight for policies that make it easier for people to be their best selves, right? And what we know is that when people have that feeling of tremendous scarcity, it's easier to turn them against the person who has less than them, right? And once again, to talk about what Mamdani did, you know, going to those Trump voters, right? And saying, okay, so you voted for Trump, but what about lowering the rent? What about free transit? And so I think that those kinds of coalitions where people make a decision, okay, we're going to focus on something else, right? And maybe we're not going to agree on everything, but we're going to make a decision not to focus on the things that divide us. I mean, it means for us, you know, as organizers, as leftists, we can't demand purity all the time. But at the same time, we have to have zero tolerance for throwing people under the bus in the name of unity, right? Because there are people who are going to use this language of making those unexpected alliances and reaching across the aisle as the excuse for throwing immigrants under the bus, for throwing trans people under the bus. And that's not the way we make those unlikely coalitions. Like, I think we can make coalition with Pope Leo. But it's going to be by focusing on the things we agree on. I guess I would just say once again, you know, I think about the Super Bowl. You know, that moment when the ad came on for Ring doorbells and the dog party or whatever the hell that was. People hated that as much as they loved Bad Bunny. And I think that should make us feel like it is possible to build a really broad Super Bowl-sized coalition. We should be reaching for that.
I couldn't think of a better way to end. With our Super Bowl size coalition. Again, thank you so much for being here.
Thank
Round
you
of
all so
applause,
much.
please, for Naomi Klein. And we are going to pass over the mic to actually hear from some of those frontline organizers that are resisting data centers, both in the US South, but also in the global South. We have a special international guest, so I'll pass it over to you, Tanya.
And to set that up, I want to bring up to the stage Steven Renderos, who, yes, claps. Steven is the executive director of Media Justice, where he leads national campaigns advancing media and technology rights for communities of color. He has helped with major victories on issues like prison, phone cost, and net neutrality, and is a leading voice on the intersection of technology, race, and power in the U.S. Pásale, Steven.
Thank you so much, Tanya. How we hanging in? Feeling good? All right, if any of you are like me and had to stand for a little while, because it's standing room only in this place, and you need to go sit down, there is an overflow room. You can go chill and still watch the whole broadcast. But excited to be here. I'm going to announce the folks that are going to be sitting up here with me, and I'm trying to do a little bit of delaying because I need the chairs to get up here on time. So I want to see in the room, how many of y'all are fighting a data center in your community? Raise your hand. Look at that. Damn, that's amazing. The truth of the matter is that we could have sliced this panel in multiple ways, had multiple combinations of people here, and it's going to be the same conversation. So I'm really excited to be bringing up some of the folks that we're bringing up, and let me introduce them real quick. So we've got Gina Mangham, who is an attorney and organizer with Renew DeKalb right out here in Georgia. What up, what up? Come on, Gina, you can make your way to the stage. It's good to have you here. We'll be in conversation together. Thank you so much. We're also going to be joined by Katie Miner, who is the Community Solutions Manager at the Alliance for Affordable Energy. They're a consumer advocacy organization fighting for an affordable and environmentally responsible energy system. Shout out. Representing Louisiana, of course. That's right. You already heard about this person. You may have also seen this person in apparently an Emmy-nominated short by A More Perfect Union, KeShaun Pearson, who is the executive director of Memphis Communities Against Pollution. They're building to eliminate air pollution. Yeah, what's up? Come on through. And KeShaun's got the microphone. Of course, he's got the mics. But fighting air pollution out in South Memphis, and we'll get to hear about that community in a bit. And last but not least, we've got Jorge Lopez, who is an attorney and organizer with the Socio-Environmental Community Movement for Land and Water, also known by their Spanish acronym MOSACAT. Yeah. So they've been challenging a data center that's being built in Quilicura, Chile, being built by Google, and successfully actually challenged them to change the whole design on the data center. So really excited to be in conversation. Let me get over to my chair. So, Naomi was talking about feeling a fierce love in the work that folks are doing. So I guess I wanted to open up with each of you and kind of ask you about what is that fierce love for you? And because we want to move into the conversation, I'd love if folks can think about that in a one sentence. What is that fierce love? Why are you in this fight? And we'll start here with KeShaun and work our way down.
First, let me say how grateful I am to be here, and thank you for inviting me to this esteemed panel with these amazing freedom fighters. I'm going to share my sentence with y'all because it's so simple. And so it's an exercise. So just look to the person to your left and say, I am somebody. Look to your right and say, I am somebody. Right? We all matter. We all have things that we bring to this world that are of value, that aren't for extraction. We have genius inside each and every one of us, and that deep love resonates far beyond what you can put a dollar sign to. And so I'm here because I matter, and the future is going to be shaped in a way that everybody who comes after us will know that they matter.
Thank you. Katie, what about for you?
Can y'all hear me? Can y'all hear me now? Good evening. All right, I know that's right. If one thing that's important to know about me, about why I do this, is because y'all, I love Louisiana real bad. I mean, to the gristle, down to the bone, y'all. When Louisiana is underwater in 20 or 30 or whatever the timeline is now, I'm gonna be right there with it. So this is why I do it. I have no choice. I was born there. I'm gonna go down there. So this is why I do it, to preserve my people and my culture and what we have left of that state.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, Gina.
It's just so great to be here and to see all of these people doing this work. It's just overwhelming, really, because we all operate in silos and we really don't understand the power we have. And so I guess I describe love as empathy. I am an empath and I hate to see people suffer. And so that's what drives me. What drives me in DeKalb County is I moved here about 30 years ago and really watched that community grow. And I've seen it grow to its best part, and then slowly the disinvestment, and slowly the industrial development, and just slowly as it changed. It's about 90% people of color. And so I love South DeKalb. I love the work we're doing, even though it's really hard. But I believe that things can be done. I believe things can be better. I believe in change, and the power is in us.
Right on. Thank you. And Jorge, for you.
Bueno, muchas gracias. Voy a tratar de hablar ahí pausado y lo más alto posible. Ya. A propósito de la pregunta, bueno, antes se decía que los revolucionarios estamos guiados por un fuerte sentimiento de amor. Y en ese sentido le encuentro totalmente la razón porque amamos a nuestras familias, amamos a nuestras comunidades, queremos que nuestros hijos también crezcan, corran en los bosques, en la naturaleza, entonces, y por eso también a veces odiamos o nos caen mal también a quienes nos quieren quitar eso. Así que eso, queremos, como nos inunda este sentimiento de amor, queremos proteger eso, la dignidad para nuestra gente. Eso, muchas gracias.
Thank you. We need to move over. Me? I'm moving over. Okay, right on. All right.
Come on in.
I'm all far away. What's going on? Wait a second. All right. Got to frame the shot. Okay. Thank you for that. Wow, now I get a different vantage point. And actually, I was coming to you, KeShaun, first. So, one, I want to say we're in the conversation about data centers, right? And in the last conversation with Naomi, part of what we heard is the main figures behind this expansion of data centers have a very nihilistic view of the world. They're preparing for the end times. And I think that shows in the way that they're showing up in the communities that are represented here on the stage. So KeShaun, for you, you are no stranger to fighting extractive industries. You know, you've been fighting the Byhalia pipeline. You managed to fight them back. You've shut down an oil refinery. And now you have to deal with Elon Musk coming to town. And this guy, this guy came to town and built a massive data center in 122 days.
Wow.
I can't even get my passport renewed that fast, right? But I guess my question to you, KeShaun, is what is the speed at which this thing got built also with the illegal, gas turbines that got built? What does the speed of this thing getting built so quickly tell you about what an Elon Musk and the people building these data centers think about a community like Boxtown in South Memphis?
So I have to first recognize that this evil that persists throughout all of history, especially where I'm from in Memphis, is not new. Boxtown was a town created from freed slaves who used the boxes from boxcars. They used the wood, they would use every piece, and they built their homes from it. This same community had to fight to survive the 1866 massacre. And so the folks who are fighting against Elon Musk are the same descendants of the folks who fought to survive being massacred and being free people. And so that evil is the same. That feeling of oppression, that our lives don't matter as much as folks with different skin colors or different tax brackets, that has persisted. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. came to Memphis after being told multiple times not to do it. But he said it was important to stand with the most marginalized people, the sanitation workers. What love, I think, looks like is standing with people who are the most marginalized, the people who take out the trash, right? The people who do the jobs that people look away from or shy away from. He chose one of the most prolific orators of all history, to give his life standing with sanitation workers. And it is in that same spirit of resilience that we will not operate under the idea that we are the path of least resistance, that we don't deserve clean air or clean water or a healthy environment. We are a resilient people, and we continue to be that. What we have seen with XAI and what Elon Musk is doing is, and someone said it earlier, a velocity of unprecedented nature. We've never seen someone build an entire power plant in less than 3 months. We've never seen the scale of pollution. Our peak nitrogen oxide levels, and I'm gonna say this and I'll be done. So we literally, as far as it pertains to pollution, we have a pre-XAI period and we have a post-XAI period. That's just how much pollution XAI has brought to our community. They've raised our peak nitrogen oxide levels and nitrogen dioxide levels, which is basically smog, right? So imagine the smog in your area increasing by 80% because of one company. And they are able to do it illegally and unlawfully without nobody pushing back. No government institutions, no mayors, no public health departments supporting you. It's just you and the folks who've been fighting for generations. But what I know is all power is with the people. All power is with the people.
Thank you, KeShaun. That's a great segue into my next question about power in the hands of the people have actually won some stuff around data centers. And this is at a time when there's so much loss, so much collapse. And one of the things that we've seen, there was a report recently looking at the last 18 months of data center organizing, and the figure is $156 billion in projects that have been stopped or slowed down just in the last 18 months. And one of those places, Gina, was in DeKalb.
We're holding on.
Holding on. DeKalb County passed a moratorium. It's a temporary moratorium, right? But it was last year, and y'all have been organizing and pushing that moratorium, the end of that moratorium forward. At the same time, at the state level, even though there's been a lot of conversation about data centers and what to do about it, a lot of policy proposals, ending tax rebates, regulating the utilities, you ended the legislative session recently with no legislation focused on data centers. So I guess I'm curious to ask you, what does that tell you about where power still sits in these fights? Like, what are you learning about that?
Well, for Georgia, nothing new. We're sitting in the capital city, and it is the economic engine. But when you leave Atlanta, you're in Georgia. And the power comes from outside the city and from, of course, the old money. And so I'm not really surprised at the legislation, especially since we have a governor who's on his way out. He's a lame duck. He's not running for anything yet. Look for him in 2028. But, we have been fighting this fight for 8 months. And we've had the moratorium extended twice. And it's not just delay. It's really just getting more and more information to everybody who will listen, to the perseverance. And I really got to thank our team, all the people that have worked with us. We have gotten experts from everywhere we can think of. And we have been down at that Board of Commissioners for every single board meeting since August. So I think perseverance. But the other thing I think, we're so used to fighting. We have got to get on the offensive. We've got to stop defending ourselves when we know what they're doing. We know what the oligarchs are doing. We know they're coming. Why don't we get on the offensive? And we're fighting the wrong enemy at the local level. We have got to get to the people who are behind this, the oligarchs, whatever you want to call them, the tech companies. If we don't get on the offensive, we will just continue to do the same thing over and over again, and you know what that's defined as, and getting the same result. So taking nothing away, because we've gotten small victories, but the battle is a lot bigger, and we can't continue to bring a knife to a gunfight. We've got to get more aggressive and do the things we need to do. So in DeKalb, just continue to pray for us, back us up. I will ask that anybody who lives in the area, please come out, especially DeKalb residents, on May 12th, 8:30, 178 Sam Street, to the Board of Commissioners, because we got a vote going on. And we're also going to be sending out a petition tomorrow. So we're really trying to organize folks. We haven't been able to get hundreds of people at every meeting, but this is going to be a big one, and we really need your support. And for more information, you can send it. You can send an email to DeKalb Coalition at currently.com. That's a new email. But we've really built a coalition around Renew DeKalb, and we really want to recognize it's not just Renew DeKalb, but a whole bunch of organizations, a whole bunch of people, and we got to work together and not work in silos.
Thank you for that. Thank you. Katie, I want to come to you. Proud Louisiana. And this is a place where Meta, Mark Zuckerberg, decided to come to town, building a massive, massive data center called Hyperion, right, or something like that. Always the weirdest names. I've seen visuals of it where they display like the size of the thing over the island of Manhattan. It almost covers all of it, you know. So it's a huge undertaking in Louisiana, and I think we need to explore something in what's happening in with Meta and in Louisiana, because I think it's a way in which the tech companies are trying to position themselves to survive the pushback. Mm-hmm. And so one of the things that's interesting about Louisiana is Meta decided to finance the deal through a private equity firm, Blue Owl, right? And so Blue Owl is actually the investment company that owns 80% of that data center project. Meta actually only owns about 20%. What it means is that in their books, to their investors, to their shareholders, it doesn't show up as a liability, all these data centers that they're building. Because if it did, guess what? Their profit margins would shrink. So financing the deal in that way means that they can walk away. If there's enough pushback, they can walk away and pretty much be scot-free. Now, a few weeks ago, coming up to the State of the Union, we heard all these tech oligarchs show up and say, you know what, we're going to make a pledge. We're going to ensure that our use of data centers doesn't hit the pocketbooks of people in their utility bills. And President Trump went on the State of the Union, made a whole big show of it, right? But I want you to kind of help us understand, what should we know about the difference between that, a pledge, them saying, we're going to make sure that this doesn't hurt you, versus a plan, which is they have a plan that if it doesn't work out, they can leave, right? They can leave Louisiana. Help us understand what we should know in this room about that.
Let me start by saying, be very happy there are children in this room. I am 38 hot right now, right? I'm shaking mad, y'all. Because while I've been talking for the past year about Hyperion, they backdoored and announced another one. Hyperion got a twin, y'all. It's called Project eVest, right? We're getting 2 hyperscalers on that site. Breaking news. And while I was ranting about the unprecedented request for 3 power plants, guess what, y'all? It's 10 power plants. What did I tell you? I told y'all. I told you. There is no way we would have gotten to 5 gigawatts with those 3 power plants. And now to backdoor and ask for 7 more, knowing that was probably the original request, but we could not see it because everything had been redacted. Oh, I see all my people in here. Hey, hey, y'all, I am so upset, right? Y'all, I'm talking about 7,000 megawatts of power for one customer. One customer. That is 7 times the power we use in New Orleans. One customer. And they keep talking about this pledge. Ooh, I pledge, right? You know who else got pledges? Ronald McDonald House and Walgreens. And they ask you if you want to donate some money and they don't actually use that money, right? Show me the paperwork. We haven't seen a single signed anything for any of this. But we did see the request. We saw them ask for 7 more gas plants. And that's not to count, we are also getting Amazon campuses, y'all. So right across the state, Amazon announced a few weeks ago, they're building 3 campuses. 3 campuses. And then Anthropic. Anthropic is coming to South Louisiana, y'all. And they're going to start some Bitcoin mining in my ancestral parishes. Baby, y'all, listen. I have been putting together combinations of cuss words. You know it's real and serious when oil and gas, legacy industry in Louisiana, is saying, who the hell is paying for that? Not me. Not me. No. Big tech and big oil are not friends right now. I mean, they sending angry letters, y'all. Strongly worded emails back and forth, right? Because y'all are saying it's going to be maybe $1 on residential bills. Imagine what that is on an industrial bill. And imagine when all these small requests that you've been making over the years, when they all come together in 5 years. What are you doing? Who is this for? Who is this for? And when we think about power, right? And I'm not talking about the infrastructure now. I'm talking about political power, right? And these NDAs, right? Louisiana has 64 parishes. There is an elected official in every single parish that has signed an NDA. Every single one of them. Every single one of them. It's so bad that there are even Public Service Commission staffers who have signed NDAs. Y'all, I can't get no information. I can't get no information. And do you know how enraging that is for a nosy person? I'm making phone calls and Wikipedia tangents, and I can't find nothing, y'all. And it's because our elected officials, our state legislature, our governor. Oh, wait, there's more, y'all. I'm so sorry. I know you asked me one specific question, y'all, but it is a hot mess right now, right? So our governor had the bright idea to introduce what he's calling a lightning initiative, right? Because politics and business isn't bad enough. We're going to rush everything, right? So what the lightning initiative does essentially is it will guarantee approval of a project in 8 months. And y'all, yesterday, the Public Service Commission had a meeting on Wednesday, and they were like, well, in the state legislature, we pass bills in 90 days. And I'm like, have y'all seen your bills? What is Louisiana #1 for? I'll wait. Nothing. Sloppy politics, right? And so now you want to rush something that is going to emit 26 million tons of carbon dioxide on our people? And on the same vein, because look, everything's related right now. Everything is cousins, right? And you want to start burying that pollution underground with carbon capture, right? Right? What? Crawfish live under there. We love crawfish. What are you doing? Who is this for? Who are you benefiting? And it's so offensive. And this is what really unseats me, y'all. This is what flabbers my gas, right? Right now in Louisiana, in South Louisiana, if you don't know, Louisiana is called Sportsman's Paradise. We have, scenic views, anything you can hunt, fish, we live off our land. Right now in South Louisiana, there is a community, a few parishes down south, right on the coast. They have not had power since 2021. They have not had Friend, they have not had electric service since Hurricane Ida in 2021. And if you think that's bad, right, it keeps getting worse. Last month, our Public Service Commission voted to allow the first ever service line abandonment in US history. Since light bulbs, y'all, our Public Service Commission allowed a utility to no longer provide services to the people that they had been providing services to. First time in history, record breaking. And so when you're investing $21 billion in electric infrastructure for a data center that does not provide any benefit to any community, but you are telling people in your sportsman's paradise that they are now abandoned and they have to find their own power, oh yeah, y'all gonna hear from me. There's more to come.
Thank you. It's a question that I think in the work that we do here around data centers, we got to keep asking ourselves, who is this actually for, right? And actually the comment you were making about the second data center popping up reminds me of Karen Howe's book, Empire of AI. And she actually talks about this in places where hyperscaler projects get built, they never come in one, they come in threes, just because of the exponential needs. Exponential needs for storage, it will always come in three. So always come in promising one thing, and it's always another.
I hate to interrupt,
please.
but the question is, we know who they're doing it for. The question is, what do we do about it?
Yeah, let's talk about
and I am sympathetic. These stories just keep coming and coming and coming. We plead with our elected officials. We have 4 Black females on the DeKalb County Commission, and the first Black female CEO. They're selling us out.
Yeah.
I mean, I hate to say it. I expected a little better. I know they're politicians.
Yeah.
We are killing our own communities. We need to recognize who the enemy is, stop playing these games. We know what's coming. We know what's here. We can talk about the problem till we're blue in the face, but we have got to strategize, and we've got to figure out how to stop fighting these individual data centers. There's got to be a better way. I don't have all the answers, but I live by 2 things, both from Frederick Douglass. One is, without, go ahead, I'm waiting. Anybody know? Power concedes nothing without a demand. And the second is, without struggle, there is no progress. So we need to start demanding and stop begging them to kill us. I mean, really, we're begging them to do the right thing, and it is clear that they have no intention of doing that.
That's right.
Can I say something? Can I respond to that?
Well, can I get Jorge in the conversation? Is that all right? And I do want to say, Gina, thank you for that agitation, because we do need that. And it's a perfect segue to just plug that there's a 2-part data center strategy session happening the next couple days. And that's precisely the conversation we need to be in. Jorge, because I think to your point about how do you fight and what do we win, I want to bring in Jorge into the conversation, because Jorge, in Chile, in a place where you were going through historic drought, Google decided to try to build a data center. And you all successfully won a landmark ruling in Chile that actually forced Google to abandon its original data center design. So I'm hoping you can talk to us about, for the communities that are in this room, fighting the same companies you're fighting, and in some cases, like literally on the same contracts, the same kinds of things. What did it take to win? Give us a sense of that. And what do you want organizers in the US to understand about why your fight and their fight are the same?
Muchas gracias. Bueno, ¿por qué nuestras luchas son iguales? La verdad es que somos defensores del territorio. Somos personas que quieren que el agua no solamente sea para las empresas, sino que sea en directo beneficio de las comunidades. Y es por eso que estamos el día de hoy acá, y es por eso que nosotros queremos contarles que todas las acciones que hicimos justamente para que obligar justamente a que Google cambiara sus procesos y directamente su sistema de enfriación del data center que quería plantear allá. Para eso nosotros hicimos propaganda en las calles, ¿ya? Nos movilizamos a mano, escribimos carteles para que la gente común y corriente, nuestros vecinos, se dieran cuenta del peligro que la instalación de Google significaba en nuestros territorios. Y en ese sentido, inundamos la comuna Cerrillos con carteles que hicimos nosotros mismos porque no teníamos tanto dinero para hacer un pendón de plástico, etcétera. Así que lo hicimos ahí con témpera, con pintura, en papel. Inundamos la comuna para eso. Además, le exigimos a Google que viniera a nuestro territorio, que se sentara a conversar con nosotros. No en las oficinas corporativas que fuésemos nosotros, que era un territorio adverso, ¿cierto?, para nosotros, sino que le exigimos que viniera al territorio a conversar. Y recuerdo desde ya un episodio en que cuando los citamos a conversar, también colocamos carteles en la carretera, donde sabíamos que ellos iban a transitar para que de alguna u otra forma también existiese una presión psicológica para ellos. Ellos en Santiago, los lugares más pudientes son del sector oriente. Entonces, inundamos justamente la carretera de donde nosotros sabíamos que ellos iban a bajar y para que vieran que la comunidad no estaba de acuerdo con ellos, ¿ya? Y lo otro que hicimos es que tratamos de agrupar a todos los movimientos, la gente organizada de Cerrillos en nuestra lucha. Y eso fue vital. No solamente estábamos los medioambientalistas, sino que también estaban las compañeras del movimiento feminista, los pobladores, que son las personas sin casa, y en general muchas personas que estaban y que los pudimos convencer de que nuestra lucha era relevante. Y entonces la sorpresa para los ejecutivos de Google fue harta. Ellos se sorprendieron de que hubiese tanta gente apoyándonos. Y de hecho, cuando llegaron se sintieron un poco asustados porque no creían que nuestra lucha fuese tan importante. Y es por eso que logramos en el año 2020 un referéndum, un plebiscito en que la gente de la comuna de Cerrillos votó en una mayoría abrumadora para que Google no se instalara en nuestra comuna. Y eso para nosotros fue muy importante. Así que eso nosotros podemos transmitirle, que es la unidad de todos los que están luchando contra el capitalismo. No solamente de quienes luchamos por el territorio, los medioambientalistas, sino que las compañeras del movimiento feminista, la diversidad, los pobladores, las personas sin casa, y todos quienes quieran unirse finalmente en esta lucha por la defensa de la vida. Para terminar, para nosotros es importante transmitir ese mensaje de que sin movilización, sin organización, esto no habría sido posible. Nosotros logramos ganar esa batalla, pero al igual me imagino que acá la legislación ambiental está hecha para que las empresas se instalen en los territorios. Entonces todavía tenemos la amenaza y es por eso que constantemente estamos presionando y movilizándonos para que Google no se instale en nuestro territorio. Eso.
Gracias, Jorge. I think there's this common through line in that even as we gain victories, we have to sustain those victories, and that requires more and more organizing. And I think the place I wanted to go next is a question we actually asked Naomi, and this might get us more into just like, what are the things we need to be saying to go on the offensive, right? The tech bros come to town and say the AI is inevitable. The technology is inevitable. The data center coming to town is inevitable. And then you hear politicians replicate that line. It's going to happen anyways. So I am kind of curious, what is it that you're saying to people to respond to that inevitability story, right? What do you say, not to us in this particular room, but when you go back to your communities, what do you say in the church basement? What do you say at the barbershop? What do you say at the Centro Comunitario? Like, what is the message that y'all are bringing to people to challenge that inevitability? Gina, can I start with you?
Well, we talk about power, but at the end of the day, we give away a lot of our power. It's only inevitable because we allow it to be. So if something's coming in, then we at least should be able to determine how it comes in, how much of it comes in, and that's really what we're talking about with our elected officials. We're not saying no AI, no data centers, because we think that's a losing argument. But there is a way you can have some technology that doesn't destroy the community. Everything doesn't have to be hyperscale. And let's just say it, it's greed. These are not necessary. When I first started this work, they were talking about there's 160 data centers in Georgia. And I think that was an exaggeration, but still. And I was like, gee, how many do they need? Because I really didn't even understand that. So it's like anything else. There's a law of diminishing returns, and all this is, it's a race to the best technology. And when it's all said and done, we're going to be looking at a data center wasteland, and that's what we're telling them. You know, we're going to be looking at our land that's now environmentally screwed, okay? Nothing but cleanup. GM left up in North DeKalb years ago, and nobody wants it because it's an environmental mess. It costs too much to rebuild. And so think about it. Think about hyperscale data center. Well, you don't have to. I mean, a lot of you are dealing with it. But after they leave. And so I think we really need to talk about not just how it's affecting us, but unfortunately, how it's going to affect them. And what we're trying to do is tell them the things that matter should matter to them. Obviously, they don't care about us, but there are things that they're going to have to deal with, the fallout. So, you know, we've got a water crisis in DeKalb. I can't even believe we're thinking about data centers the way that's going. We're under a federal consent decree. And so I think we really need to try and find those common areas where maybe it's in their best interest to not go down this road.
Katie, can we go next to you?
Y'all know I love humor. How many of you got a Blu-ray DVD player? Raise your hand if you got a Blu-ray. Still? What?
I just got it.
This is Take Back Tech, okay?
Oh, I'm with my people. If we leaned on everything that they said was inevitable, where would we be right now? And if these language models know so much with all their degrees and everything, then why does it need to learn from me? The math doesn't math. And so you just get people thinking, they're like, wait a minute, you're right, actually. Yeah, you got to double check what it said. It ain't ready yet, y'all. It got to cook some more.
All right, KeShaun.
So I'm going to lean into a couple different pieces real quick. So on the question about really what it is that you speak to people about, we talk about a lot of the health concerns, right? In Shelby County, our children miss more school and are sicker because of the air quality that we already have, which is out of attainment for low-level ozone or smog. We have children who outpace the ER more than anybody else in the state of Tennessee. And specifically, it's in 38109, where I'm from, where I live. And so I live with a real duality because I was born premature and I have chronic allergies. And so in 38109, you either get allergies or you get asthma. And that is our reality. And so we talk and we speak from our lived experience. We are still grappling with the fallout from the industrial era as we start a new one, right? And they're using the same textbook, the same playbook, the same tactics. And so we are just seeing digital redlining where we saw the original redlining. And we are going to pay the cost for it. And we continue to bear the body burden. And so I'm just leaning real quick into the ways that we're fighting back. It might seem inevitable, right, that the most wealthiest person on the planet on paper, right, can purchase anything and do whatever it is that he chooses. What is a small, poor, black community going to do to this man, right? But what we did was, similar to what Jorge was saying, we put up a huge fight. We continue to host marches. We continue to plaster our posters all over about how dangerous it was. I got my Memphis people in here right now, right, who walked miles and miles to raise the awareness of our community. And what we also did was we got a community benefits ordinance passed by the same mayor who's trying to poison us. And guess who became the chair of the Community Advisory Board to oversee that? Me. And so we are not powerless. We are far from powerless. We have to do the imagination work about what innovative approaches can we use to change things. And so now we're looking at direct actions which will use the property tax money from this evil, disgusting corporation that I wish would leave tomorrow. But because they have property taxes that they've already given to the city and those have been delegated to this board, we may actually see folks get healthcare vouchers, our children get inhalers at no cost, and really dynamically change the situation in real time. So we are fighting back, and we will continue to do so. And as long as they are fighting against us, we're going to fight for us.
That's right. That's right. Okay, Jorge, for you, what's the message for you, for people who say this is inevitable? Para los que dicen que es inevitable.
Los centros de datos se venden en Chile y me imagino que también en el mundo como un supuesto progreso para nuestras comunidades. Supuestamente vamos a tener mejor tecnología, un internet más rápido y en general un beneficio para las comunidades. Cuando nosotros nos presentaron el proyecto de Google, mucha gente se puso contenta porque iba a ser una oportunidad laboral para familias de Cerrillos. Pero cuando nosotros empezamos a buscar un poquito más y nos dimos cuenta que el proyecto iba a utilizar 169 litros de agua por segundo, nosotros nos fuimos para atrás. No sé cuánta agua utilizan un data center, por ejemplo, acá en Atlanta, pero para nosotros, en un contexto de sequía, eso no era tolerable. Y en ese sentido, nos dimos el trabajo, igual que como explican los demás exponentes, de ir a convencer, de ir a tocar las puertas de que esto no significaba un progreso para las comunidades, sino todo lo contrario. Un mayor estrés hídrico, un mayor estrés energético y finalmente también empleos precarios. Los empleos que que iba a traer ese data center eran principalmente de limpieza y no un empleo calificado. Entonces, cuando la gente se da cuenta que esa es la realidad, ya lo empieza a pensar dos veces. Y en ese sentido se da cuenta de que si bien esto se vende como que es un camino y una revolución que es inevitable, la gente también se da cuenta de que la inteligencia artificial, los centros de datos, tienen una cara bien fea. Además, en Chile son bien toscos, son bien feos, son como bodegas así cerradas, donde no se puede ver qué es lo que hay adentro. Entonces, esta idea de tecnología empieza como a desmoronarse un poco. Entonces, finalmente, yo puedo decirle que esto tiene sus perjuicios evidentes, de que además el uso excesivo también de la inteligencia artificial está perdiendo también nuestras habilidades cognitivas. Todo lo que nosotros antes desarrollábamos para pensar y quizás nos tardábamos muchas horas, ya lo podemos hacer solamente en segundos, pero eso también tiene sus perjuicios. Entonces, cuando nosotros conversamos eso con las comunidades, ya la idea de esta hermosa, de esta nube digital en que ellos supuestamente nos invitaban, no es real. Entonces, ha sido también un proceso darnos cuenta de que esta idea bonita, hermosa, digital, no es tal. Eso.
Gracias, Jorge. Okay. All right. Let me get us into our last question so that we can wrap up. Is that cool, KeShaun? And then I'll get you going first. So y'all have invited us in to, Gina, you've actually already started doing this, invited us in to take action. You know, the space is great. We can have all the great conversations, but if we don't walk out of here with marching orders, then we've done something wrong. So we know that there's ways that we can support your fight. And my question for the rest of the panel is, how can we, this group, this we here, support your fights? KeShaun, I'll start with you. Feel free to jump in on anything you wanted to.
Thank you so much. And so he was just speaking everything that I wanted to say.
My bad.
Because the truth is, everything that they have sold us when they came to Memphis all failed to materialize. They promised us hundreds of jobs. It's almost 2 years later. That never happened, right? We got janitorial jobs and we got security jobs, right? They promised us that they were going to build a water reuse facility to make sure our water was protected and safe, right, when they first got in here. That has been indefinitely paused, didn't materialize, right? When they talk about the inevitability of these things, they themselves are not even seeing it through, the promises that they've made. And so this world, this experience that we are in is also shaped by us. We get to decide what the future looks like. It is not just the wealthiest people. It's not just the white people or the white men who get to decide. We all get to collectively make decisions about what our future looks like. And so don't resign to this idea that this dystopian reality where robots take over everything and AI makes you and humanity into nothingness. We don't have to carry that. We don't have to believe that, because we know the sovereignty and the intelligence of the human race is one of the most magnificent things in this universe. And so we can imagine something different. That is one of the challenges of being in this space. And what I hope this whole weekend does is shift our imagination, shift it away from one that looks like what Sam Altman and what Elon Musk and these other folks are saying. Shift it to something that is more human, that is more real, that is more loving and caring. That is what we can do. And truthfully, if you want to help Memphis, tell somebody that you're here. Too often, we attend events like these. We care so deeply about movement work, and the closest 10 people to you don't even know. There is power in our collective resistance. As individuals, we are not as strong mentally, physically, intellectually. But our communities, our phone branches, our friendship branches, the more that we include those folks in what we do, the more that we teach them and involve them and include them, we have to also ourselves move away from the hubris and piety of I'm doing so good. If we not doing so good, then it don't matter. And so my encouragement is for every single person in here, pick 5 people, right? Went to high school with them, went to college with them. They live on your street, but they have no idea what's going on in Memphis, Tennessee. They have no idea the amount of pollution that is spewing into our air and will cause us to suffer for generations. And so please go to www.memphiscap.org. We have a ton of resources and a new report about the damages of the air pollution to our lungs that is coming from the XAI facilities. And so it's a wealth of information, but it is extremely important that we also know the truth. Thank you.
Katie, what are our marching orders? How do we support your fight?
That. But there's a favor I'm going to ask you all, right? So oftentimes people dismiss the folks down in Louisiana, right, or in these southern states because of how they voted, without ever sitting with the fact that disenfranchisement is real.
Come on.
There's a Supreme Court case being heard right now out of Louisiana. They're trying to tear down the Voting Rights Act. We didn't all vote like that. There are a whole bunch of us out there who are doing the same work we do, raising families, teaching kids, healthcare workers, even the chemical plant workers, right? There are people trying to make their lives better every single day. Stop dismissing folks just because a loud majority made a decision for the rest of us. That's number one, right? We ain't stupid. We goofy, but we're not stupid, okay? Additionally, I work at the Alliance for Affordable Energy. We are the state's only consumer advocate at the Public Service Commission and at the New Orleans City Council. We write about everything we do, y'all. Every docket we intervene in, anything that we even think could affect not just the people in Louisiana, but anything that may have implications for the rest of the country, like a service line abandonment, we talk about it. LIHEAP funding that our president cut, we talk about it. We share it with folks. We raise the alarm. We ring the bell. We're the yellers in the street. Share it. Share it. If you see it, share it. And let folks know this is not just this silo we're working in is actually not really a silo, y'all. It's not a silo. It's just so much happening at one time. It feels that way. And that's by design, right? That's by design. They are trying to overwhelm us. But clearly they're not doing very good of a job, right? So share the information you see. If it's a TikTok, if it's a news article, if it's just word of mouth, share that story so that more people can know there are rooms of people fighting this everywhere, every day, all the time. Thank you.
Thank you, Katie. Gina, you invited us in to some specific actions.
One plea. Stop shopping at Amazon.
Okay. Thank you.
No, really, we're feeding the frenzy. And the other thing is, don't buy the hype. I don't really know. Does anybody really have $1 trillion or $1 billion? No. On paper. But I could have $1 trillion on paper, right? We really are living in a matrix. It's so crazy. I mean, they say they have all this money and this power, but where could you spend $1 trillion, really? It's to make us think they have power that they really don't have. And we give it to them because we think they have it. But the power is in this room. And so we need to stop feeding the monster. That's that bit about struggle. Look, I have a hard time with it too, okay? But we can stop feeding the monster. Because we believe this stuff, we think it's inevitable, we think we have to shop at Amazon, we think we have to be on social media all the time, although that is a helpful communication tool. But we really do need to fight back by not supporting the people that are killing us. All right, thanks.
And Jorge, I'll give you the final word here. How can this community support your fight?
Sí, bueno, voy a aprovechar también de dar el aviso de que nos puedan seguir, que me dijeron desde Chile, que por favor nos puedan seguir en nuestras redes sociales, también MOSACAT Chile. Voy a mandar también el link para nosotros. Cada vez que ustedes ponen seguir, se nos agranda también mucho el corazón. Eso por un lado. Y además, claro, la invitación final es salir a convencer. Eso yo creo que es la tarea que nosotros debemos hacer. Salir a tocar puertas, salir incluso a los lugares donde a veces nos cuesta más. Es ahí donde nosotros debemos estar. No solamente en nuestros espacios de confort, en nuestros colectivos quizás, en la universidad, sino ir a los barrios a explicar justamente de qué se tratan nuestras luchas. Yo creo que eso es vital para convencer mentes y corazones que necesitamos para la lucha. Así que esa es la invitación a unirse, a organizarse y a movilizarse. Muchas gracias.
Thank you. Wow. The only thing I'll say in closing is just that I think a lot of what I hear in the conversation actually reminds me of what Marcus was inviting us into earlier and telling the story of his ancestors being forced off the land and the message they had to deliver to each other, which is keep going, right? And that's a lot of what I hear in the stories and all of y'all's stories is that against whatever the conditions are, keep going. Can we give them a huge round of applause?